What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about the Quad S-1 bookshelf speaker. A lot of you guys throughout the years have recommended I check out the Quad S-2. I couldn't get my hands on those, but I got my hands on the little brother, the S-1. And we're going to talk about it. I'll throw the specs on screen and I'll talk about some standout features real quick. So small speaker, very small, beautiful wood veneer, like that quite a bit. Tiny driver, just a 4-inch, but quite a large, it's not a large ribbon tweeter, but for how small the speaker is, it was a little bit of a bigger ribbon, folded horn, whatever you want to call it, AMT tweeter than I was expecting. We have 2 pairs of 4-way binding posts out back, so they are bi-wireable, a feature no one will ever use. So what do they sound like? So first, let me say this. They are $1,000 for US customers, which is about double what they cost in most other countries. I'm not sure why that is. I do understand shipping, import taxes, and logistics do add to the cost, but I can't help but feel the US dealer network simply thought they could sell them for more money. And I gotta be honest, I do feel like they're not the best value for US customers. Now, if you're in another country where they're closer to $500 or so, that'll change things quite a bit. I've never seen a product double in price from its home country to a second country, at least in the US. Anyhow, I digress. What does it sound like? So let's start with the treble. The treble being an AMT tweeter, it's going to give you the characteristics associated with an AMT tweeter. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. The jury is pretty much split on this one. Some people do like it quite a bit for the effects that it gives. It's going to image quite large. There's going to be a sense of spaciousness to all the sounds. Some sounds are going to project more into the room than you may be used to. There may be more depth than you're used to, and sometimes even a sense of distance with certain parts of the music, if you will. So that's not a feature I like. Personally, I don't like AMTs, and it's not just these. It doesn't matter who makes them. I'm simply not the biggest fan of AMTs. It seems like a lot of reviewers aren't. I've heard a lot of reviewers say that, but I have a few friends that absolutely love AMT tweeters, whether it's a Martin Logan or a Quad or a Wharfdale. They just love AMT tweeters. And I think it's for those reasons that I mentioned, that how the presentation is just the spatialness of it. To me, it sounds almost like fake, but I think to other people, I think it adds a sense of realism. So I think it's one of those things kind of like food. To me, one dish might be a little too spicy, but for someone else it might be perfectly spicy. And that's kind of what's going on with AMT tweeters. So again, I do highly recommend a try before you buy scenario if possible. Moving down to the mid-range is going to be quite luscious. It's going to have a good amount of bloom to it, and it's going to be very organic sounding, if you will. It is not necessarily a very it's hard to call it warm because there's not a lot of bass with how small they are, but if you could call a speaker warm that doesn't have a whole lot of bass, I guess that's kind of how you could describe these. There's good mid-range texture as well. I had no complaints about the mid-range. Moving down to the bass, there just isn't any of it. You absolutely will need a subwoofer if you're going to be listening to these. I would recommend something as small as a Rel T0 even. You just need something to give these just a little bit more thickness. They have none of their own, and this is where things get a little bit interesting. So I've told you what they sound like. Let me give you my overall. These are not an in-room speaker. These are a desktop speaker, in my opinion. These speakers had a hard time filling my small room. My room's only 10 feet wide, 12 feet deep, and has 9-foot ceilings. And on the stands, they were not really happy, and I don't think they were designed for that. If they're designed to go on stands, I think it's for a room even smaller than mine. I know some people in England have these tiny, tiny rooms that are just maybe 6 feet wide and 7 or 8 feet deep, and maybe these would perform better in a room that tiny. So I'd say small room and up, no good, these speakers. These speakers, tiny room or desktop, but I think desktop is really where they're at. But the next issue that I have is they are difficult to drive, and I don't mean just a little bit. These are really, really difficult to drive. These are one of the most difficult to drive speakers I have had here. Another speaker that comes to mind that was really difficult to drive also was the PSB P3. That thing needed so much power to get going, and these are no different. And I can't help but feel that that's a little bit odd for a desktop speaker. I'd imagine most people with a desktop setup, they're hoping to use something maybe a cool tube amp that just has maybe 3 or 4 watts or something like that. And you can't do that with these. You can't. You're going to need something with quite a bit of power. Yeah, I really mean that. I want to stress that. I mean, the spec is 84 dB. That's not very sensitive at all. I think in a real world scenario, it's even slightly lower. I just wouldn't be surprised. I think the 84 dB is like a little bit generous, if you will. So I wasn't going to make this video originally. I'm borrowing these from a friend. They're not a review sample. And I was originally just going to give them back to him and be like, hey man, these like weren't really for me. They just weren't for the room. Like I just don't want to deal with it. But then I thought, I think someone might buy these thinking that they could put them in their room and they would sound good. And I decided I was going to make this video and review these speakers just really to drive home this primary point that these are desktop speakers. They're not going to give you room filling sound. You don't want to sit far away from them. They're best just 2 or 3 feet away. And they do need some power, even being desktop speakers. And with any AMT tweeter, make sure you do like the sound of an AMT tweeter. It is quite good for an AMT tweeter, and the sound is quite refined. But if you're looking for a speaker to fill a room, at this price for US customers, $1,000, you've got a lot of better options, a lot, mainly because of the size. Focal Core 806 is better just from top to bottom. The mid-range isn't going to be as lush, it's a little bit more analytical. Its top end is going to give you quite a bit more detail, but being a traditional tweeter, the Focal Core 806 is not going to have that AMT style spatialness to its presentation. The bass on the Focal Core 806 is quite superior to the Quad S1, of course being a much larger 6.5-inch driver compared to the 4-inch on the Quad S1. I'll be honest, it looks even smaller than a 4-inch. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 3.75 or something. I'm not going to really take you through any more comparisons because anything larger is going to be better at filling a room, and this is really a desktop speaker in my opinion. I don't think you should use this for a room. I think these only belong on a desktop, and at $1,000, I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah. I don't think there's much else to say about these guys. I'm going to try to just wrap it up here, guys. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. Until next time, later.